This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde.
Welcome to another episode of Agent Provocateur. I'm Allan Walsh with Adam Wylde.
What's going on?
How are you this morning, Adam?
I'm feeling sunny this morning, and it's because I sent out the show rundown yesterday, and the one thing I forgot was the thing that hadn't happened yet, which is one of your clients is now goaltender / ice duty. What's going on there?
Yeah, what a lot of people don't know is Marc-Andre Fleury has joined the Wylde Ice crew.
That's right.
and any games that he's not going to play, to fight boredom, and he's going to go out there on the ice every TV timeout and shovel some snow.
It seems like so many people have said any day in the NHL is a good day. He seems to be the guy that enjoys it the most.
So I talked to him last night. Nobody knew he was at the game, right? Preseason game. If you're not dressing, veteran guy, a lot of vets just stay home. Mm-hmm. And he even likes to go on the road when he's not dressing in preseason to mentor the younger guys and help create that bond on the road. It's the kind of guy he is. But he came up with the idea. He got a wig, glasses, thick horn-rimmed glasses, went out during the TV timeout, did a flyby the bench, and he yelled, "Wake up, boys! Come on, get to work!" And no one knew who it was. And he did a second flyby and did it again. And while he was going by, one of the guys on the bench goes, "Is that Flower?" And the entire bench looked at him and just cracked up.
That's amazing. Yeah, I loved it. It was what a great highlight from last night, because honestly, Allan, the preseason has given us a lot of drama. So it was actually a really nice kind of light sort of thing to put in there. The Ottawa-Montreal game, the Leafs Montreal games, there have been injuries, there's been fights, there's been this, there's been that. But nothing, Allan, has been more dramatic than what's going on in Boston. And so for anybody that hasn't quite caught it yet, I'm just going to recap. Jeremy Swayman, very good goaltender. He is the goaltender of Boston's future, ostensibly, but not under contract. And in a situation where you have what I guess there are some rumors of his team leaking some information to certain podcasts like Chicklets, friend of the show, Paul Bissonnette. And then the Boston Bruins management being upset about it. 13 days ago, Don Sweeney was in front of everybody saying, factually inaccurate. None of that's true. And then a couple days ago, you have the president, Cam Neely, who is a Boston Bruins legend, saying, "I have 64 million reasons why he should be playing right now, or I'd be playing right now," which prompted Louis Gross to make a statement and say, "Hey, listen, that was unfair to Jeremy, and we never got an offer like that." And I think it was Frank Saravalli yesterday who said the highest that Boston offered was $7.8 million a year. All of this drama. And Allan, Jeremy's not a client of yours. He's a client of Louis Gross. We're not going to go commenting on Jeremy's situation. But in a holdout situation, and I said that word on purpose, in a holdout situation.
Okay, do you want me to jump right through the screen and strangle you?
I know how mad it makes you.
Okay, first of all, a player without a contract cannot hold out. And even though we briefly touched upon this last episode, there still is that misnomer leaching into the vernacular of the player withholding services or holding out. He is not holding out. A Group 2 restricted free agent without a contract is not holding out technically. Not that I believe it's going to happen. Not that we're starting any rumors about this happening, but technically, nothing stops this player from signing an offer sheet with another team today.
That's right.
He
That's
is without contract. He is not holding out.
He's not holding out.
Continue, please.
Okay. So, you did talk about that a little bit on the last episode. I said holding out because I knew it would get you. And I think when I look at where Jeremy Swayman is, one thing that you said last episode that really hit me was, well, okay, so your buddies all leave from training. They go to training camp. Then your family's like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Every single day, your friends and family are texting you. Not an easy situation for the player to be in. But, Allan, you've been in negotiations that have gone sideways with RFAs. If you're an agent in the business and you've had a client, this happens. What is the inside perspective on this? Let's start with the player. What's a guy like Jeremy Swayman likely going through in this position?
So let's back up a little bit and talk about how you end up getting to this point.
Good point. Yeah. Okay. Let's start there. Better.
How do you get here? How do you get here? A player in this situation, a Group 2 restricted free agent, interestingly enough, almost every situation where a player is without contract heading into training camp, he is a restricted free agent without arbitration rights. And almost every situation where the player does have arbitration rights, the team or the player, because it is mutual under the CBA, would file for arbitration. And that would mean one thing. It would guarantee by the first day of training camp, the player would have a contract and be in camp, right? You can negotiate all through the summer up to the actual starting of the arbitration hearing, and negotiate a deal of any length from 1 to 8 years, right? But once the hearing starts, you cannot settle the case. The case must go to hearing and ultimately an arbitrator's decision. So there's a curious wrinkle here how a player in Jeremy Swayman's situation had arbitration rights, but somehow did not end up in arbitration this year, even though last year he did have arbitration rights. It ultimately went to a hearing, and he played this past season under a 1-year arbitration decision. So in 99.99% of the cases, you're dealing with a player coming out of entry level who has not yet achieved the number of pro seasons to have arbitration rights, typically going through a normal cycle that's 4 years pro. So take, for example, somebody you're very familiar with in a situation you're very familiar with, William Nylander.
Right.
He did not have arb rights. The only leverage, and that's the key, the only leverage he had was to sit and not sign a deal and sit during training camp and into the regular season. Right. That's it. Now, let's talk about pressure points. I've always believed one thing, and we've talked about it previously. Deals usually get done at the deadline. You need a deadline.
What do you always say about deadlines?
Deadlines clarify the mind. Deadlines bring on deals, right? Because that's when both sides are under pressure. There's a pressure point to get something done. You sit there all summer. Players particularly get very frustrated. Why isn't there any movement? Why isn't there any negotiating going on right now? Many times, and this would surprise a lot of people, there is literally zero negotiation going on in the summer. Why? Because the GMs and the teams believe that they won't get a serious offer from the player and the agent until just before either an arbitration hearing or just before the start of training camp. That's when it gets real. And that's when both sides, usually there's no movement on both sides through an entire summer. You get to an arbitration hearing, you get to the start of training camp on a higher profile a player in a higher profile negotiation. Both sides tend to become more focused on reaching a deal, and most of the time the player and the club get that deal done. We saw a number of restricted free agents sign deals in the 48 hours leading up to the start of training camp this year or into the first day or two of training camp. That's the pressure point, and that's why those deals happen. And I've had many times a player in July, August call me in that situation and say, I just don't understand why there's no discussions going on right now. And I explained, there's no discussions going on right now because we're here and they're there, and both sides are not. There's no pressure. There's no reason for either side right now. Let other deals get done to clarify the cluster of comparables that are out there. The more deals that get done, there's usually a rhyme and reason to the stacking of these deals in a certain chronological order to benefit the player. So sit tight, let these deals get done. Our deal is only going to get done as we hear the footsteps to training camp.
Right.
And that's usually what happens. Okay. Now, I have been involved in several situations over my 30 years as an agent. This is my 30th year as a certified NHLPA agent representing players. And in that time, I've had a number of situations where Group 2 players have not signed deals leading up to the start of camp. And I'll go all the way back to one of the first times I was involved in that situation. And it was Marty Havlat with the Ottawa Senators.
I remember that.
The general manager was John Muckler. The assistant general manager was Pete Chiarelli. We had several meetings face-to-face in August with very little movement. And we had settled on ultimately only talking about a 2-year deal because it was impossible to come to any meeting of the minds for anything longer than 2 years. Training camp started and we had no deal. And Marty had been training in Montreal. I was in Montreal for the entire month of August. We were running our summer training camp there for our pro players. And then everybody scattered to their NHL teams for training camp. And it was Marty and I alone together in Montreal. And all summer we had discussed, and I had said to him this: first of all, the number one rule is this: the pen is always in the player's hand.
Right.
Not the agent's hand. Right? So I always say to the player, you need to understand something. You're telling me, based on all of the information I'm giving you on comparable contracts, analytics, whatever it is we've put forward to analyze together what your value is within the system. Okay? Now you're in control. You tell me what you want to do, and I'm going to go do it. And I'm going to go do it to the best of my ability. But the pen is always in your hand, and you always control when you sign that contract. Okay?
Wow.
And that's an important conversation to have. And we had that conversation. And now we're leading up to the start of camp. Everyone scatters. We're in Montreal alone. And the pressure on both sides mounts. So Marty's getting messages from teammates. We got your back. We support you. This is your turn. Mm-hmm. We've all been there before. Mm-hmm. Veteran guys. But, and this is the important but, we got your back now, but get your deal done by the start of the season.
Oh,
right. That's the message that was being delivered from the veteran guys. You do what you need to do. We're on your side. You fight the man. You get your contract. You get your money, but don't hurt the team. And that is very much part of the NHL culture, right? Don't hurt the team. It's all about us, not about the individual. Now, that doesn't exist in the NBA. If an NBA player called another NBA player in a similar situation and said, get your deal done by the start of the season, first of all, he would never say that. But right. If he did, the player on the receiving end would fall over laughing. This is about, I'm the CEO of my business, mm-hmm. and you're the CEO of your business, and we're running enterprises here. And what do you mean, get my deal done for the team now? That doesn't exist in the NBA. It doesn't exist in other sports. But the hockey culture that began very much, not meaning to offend anybody, as indentured servitude in the 40s and 50s and 60s that has been passed on down the line. That culture still, that mentality, there's strands and shreds of it that still exist out there. It's still there. Not in any way the way it used to be, but the mentality still exists, especially amongst some of the old timers and veteran guys. I mean, I'm negotiating with John Muckler, rest in peace, but John Muckler has a storied history in the game, had been around for many, many, many years. I'm a younger, newer agent on the scene. It's the early 2000s. And, I'm a young whippersnapper with a hotshot, arrogant client coming in. And, in the old days, we used to give you a number and you used to sign it that day. What do you mean negotiate? What do you mean go back and forth? What do you mean this guy got that and that guy got that? Well, I don't care what anybody else got. This is my number. Sign your contract, shut up and get into camp. Right. And that's where they were coming from to some extent.
Right.
I remember Peter Chiarelli, because at a certain point in time, I think John Muckler was tired of talking to me. And was every conversation there was a very high level of frustration on his part. And at a certain point in time, he turned things over to Peter Chiarelli. And Peter's my generation. He liked Marty. Yeah. We always got along really well. Peter started in the business as an agent, and our conversations were always professional and cordial. And he would laugh about how my name would come up in the office with mucks and his face would turn red and smoke would come out of his ears, and say, it's just better right now if you and I just talk between each other. And Peter joked at one time, he said, You're the only agent where I know your cell number by heart.
I like that.
And for years afterward, we'd meet up and laugh, and he'd go, 310-493, because I still remember the number. It's emblazoned in my brain. So Marty was a very principled guy. And I had said to Marty, and this is another part of that very important conversation that needs to take place between the agent and player before the start of training camp. And that's this is going to get real now conversation when everybody leaves and everybody goes off to their camps and it's just you alone. And part of that conversation centers on how far are you willing to take this, and do you truly believe in the position we're taking? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I say to players, if you're going to say before the start of training camp, this is my value, and I'm not signing for less, and you go through camp and take the club's offer, you basically caved, and you look weak, and you will be remembered in future negotiations as a guy who folded his cards and caved in.
Right.
Okay? If you're going to do that, and again, the pen is in your hand, you do that before the start of training camp.
Okay.
If you're going to say to me, 3 weeks from now, let's just take the team's offer, then you fucking take it now. If you believe in this, we are going to lock arms, and we are going to take this to the very end. We may not get every dollar that we're asking for today, but you're not signing that contract until you're getting your number. And everyone is going to remember that on the management side and in our industry, that you believed in yourself, you believed in a number, you conducted yourself professionally, but there's nothing wrong with standing up and saying, this is what I'm worth. Mm-hmm. I'm not asking for anything beyond what I'm worth, and I'm not fucking signing that deal until you give me what I'm worth. But you look bad, and it will be remembered if you say that, and you say that with conviction, and 3 weeks later you say, yeah, okay, I just want to play. Right. Let's just sign it, and I just want to play. Don't do that. Don't miss camp. If you're going to do that, do it right now. And when the player after that speech says, I hear you, I understand everything you've said, this is what I believe in, let's lock arms and let's go. And that's what Marty did.
Right.
And I've had other players do that. And we came to the end of camp and the next critical pressure point. Start a training camp, drop the puck on the regular season. Why is it now another critical pressure point? Well, now every day that goes by is a day in the regular season that a player is missing salary.
Yes.
Okay? Players are not paid at all during training camp. So it becomes more real for the player. And we went through puck drop on the start of the regular season. And Marty said, if the season starts NHL regular season. I'm not sitting in Montreal training anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting on a plane and I'm going back to Czech. And I'll train there. But I'm going home. Montreal, Ottawa, 2-hour drive. Now he's going to get on a plane and fly back to Prague. That's
Seven
indication that instead of things getting closer, things are getting further apart and the sides are getting even more dug in. And the entire week of puck drop leading up to Saturday night, hockey night in Canada, start of the season, Ottawa Senators. At the time, they were a really good team. Zdeno Chara, Marian Hossa,
Spezza, Heatley.
They had Danny Heatley wasn't there yet. It was before that, but it was a really good team. They were a really good team. I talked to Peter Chiarelli that morning, and we were still, I would say, as far apart as we were from the start of training camp. And I said, Peter, Marty Havlat has a flight leaving Montreal, flying to Prague at, I think it was 7:30 p.m. And I'm taking him to the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets on that plane and he flies back to Czech, that's it. We're not even talking anymore. Okay. There'll be no more negotiating. It's this number or nothing. And he's prepared to sit the year. And we went to the airport, and Marty actually went through security.
No.
And he is sitting at the gate, and Peter called. And at the time, this was before the hard salary, Gary's triple hard salary cap in 2005.
Yes.
It was before that.
Okay.
And you were able to negotiate individual bonuses in any contract. And it didn't have to be an over 35 plus contract. It didn't have to be an injured player contract. It didn't have to be, entry level contract. You could put any kind of player bonus into individual scoring, goals, assists. And we came up with a bunch of bonuses that were attainable to bridge the gap. And we made the deal 30 minutes before Marty got on the plane.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then he and I went to Moishe's Steakhouse in Montreal. The next morning, he was going to drive to Ottawa and sign the contract. And Ottawa had put out a press release that we have a deal done. And Ron McLean called me. They were doing a segment on Hockey Night in Canada, and they wanted to talk to Marty about the new contract he just signed. It was between the second and third period. The Senators were playing, and Marty jumped on with Ron McLean and on Hockey Night in Canada talked about signing the deal, confirmed the deal, and that he would be going to Ottawa the next day.
What a story. That's great. The drama right to the end.
To the end.
Now, Allan, a couple things you brought up there, and I want to talk about it. So first off, you bring up agent and general manager, and when the agent's name gets brought up, the general manager turns red and steam comes out of their ears. Number two, pressure points. And as it pertains to, and this, like you said, this happens every few years very publicly anyway, but this year it's the Swayman, Louis Gross camp and the Boston Bruins management camp.
Sure, but hold on one second here. Nylander, if you recall, under the current CBA, a restricted free agent must sign his contract by December 1.
Yes.
Or he's ineligible to play the rest of the current season.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Nylander signed
with half an hour
reportedly, to go. 15 minutes, the contract got registered 15 minutes before the deadline.
Which is a 3 p.m. deadline or something. There's like some weird timing. There's like it's not a midnight. It's like mid-afternoon or something weird. I remember
I
being
think
in the
it's,
mall when it
it's-
happened.
It's 5 p.m. New York time.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
I was at a mall shopping when it popped in. I remember I got a text from Steve of all people. What a surprise. But the reason I bring those up, it's the management and agent locking horns and the pressure points is sometimes teams try to apply pressure points the way that sometimes agents try to apply pressure points. And the third column in this, the third party, is the media and fans and public perception. And what happened in this particular instance, and I'm not asking you to comment directly on it, is Cam Neely made the comment about the $64 million. And then Louis Gross said, we've never even been offered that. What happens and how do you come back from a situation where it's now public and it's messy? How do you come back? And by the way, when it gets public and messy, do the team and the player go, you know what, let's sleep on it. Tomorrow morning, we're going to call, apologize to each other and get back to the negotiation? Or does that usually drive a wedge and make things harder?
When you get to a certain point, it can be cordial. It could not be cordial. I have long-standing relationships with general managers, going back, literally to the very beginning of me entering the business. Some of the relationships go back 30 years. And that still doesn't prevent you being on the phone yelling, fuck you, back at each other as you're negotiating. Things get heated. The relationships that stand the test of time are when you can do that and either later that day or the next morning get back on the phone and put it behind you, laugh about it, and keep working together to try to get to the finish line on the deal.
Okay.
Right. I can tell you this, it's a lot more cordial today than it used to be pre salary cap. And I think, players obviously are making a lot more money today than they did 25, 30 years ago. Although the top players are making just about the same today. And it's taken them 25 years to get back to where they were in the year 2000. We've done whole shows on that.
Yes.
So, go look at our library of shows on YouTube if you want to see more of what I'm talking about there. But it's interesting. I had a conversation, a very memorable conversation with Bob Goodnow after the 2005 debacle where the few rats and traitors amongst NHL players and the agents that were involved with them in selling the NHLPA and the entire player membership down the river in agreeing to Gary's triple hard salary cap. And Bob said, at the end of the day now, Allan, agents are not agents anymore. Don't use that word. They're not agents. You know what they are? They're allocators. Because being an agent, and remember, Bob started off in the hockey business as an agent.
Right.
Because agents used to be able to bring what he considered value into the relationship. And I love Bob. I've always loved Bob, but it was kind of demeaning.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Do you know how much more we do than just negotiate the contract? But he was very bitter about the way things ended, and rightfully so. But his name for agents became, the commonplace name was allocators. He would talk about an agent and go, have you talked to this allocator lately? And what about that allocator? And the meaning behind that was, just think when we started playing hockey again in 2005, the upper limit to the salary cap, the first ever salary cap in hockey, was $39 million.
God. Oh
right?
my God.
So you had to put an entire roster on the ice for $39 million. So you know, Bob said, well, what are you going to do now? You're running a team. You can take all your players into a room and you're a cap team. And you say, guys, here's a wheelbarrow full of $39 million. We're going to put it in the center of the room. We're leaving. You guys figure out from now who gets what.
Yep.
Right? Because if a player gets 9 million, 9.5 million, 10 million, what that necessarily means under a cap is that somebody else is getting less.
Yes.
And the evils of the cap, one of many, is it pits player against player as opposed to players as employees and the product.
Right.
Negotiating with management their fair market value without unnecessary restrictions on what their value truly is. If there is a league-wide marketplace and players are allowed to, at different points of their careers, whether it's arbitration or unrestricted free agency, negotiate their fair market value. You know, who's the lowest paid player in the NHL? Right now, who's the lowest paid player in the NHL? Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid. Okay? The lowest paid player in the NHL.
All right.
Take every top player in the league, and that's the order of the lowest paid players in the league. Right? Because Connor McDavid should be making $45 million a year. Right? Sidney Crosby 20 years ago was making 8.7 million, and today he's still making 8.7 million. Somebody sent me something. When Crosby signed his first deal at 8.7 million, LeBron was making 14 million.
Oh my God. And
Sidney Crosby is still making 8.7, and LeBron is making 48 million.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the insanity to me of and the evils of the hard salary cap. But if you look at it from the perspective of, you know, just take a player like Jeremy Swayman, there's two considerations in my mind that impact the universe of the NHL far beyond the player and the club. And that is the goalie market.
Yes.
And the goalie market was artificially suppressed by many, many years by arguably one of the greatest goalies in history, Martin Brodeur. Because Martin Brodeur was playing for years and years and years at $4 and $4.5 million in New Jersey a year. And any other goalie that came up in a negotiation who wanted to surpass that number, the response from the general manager is, are you kidding me? Your guy is not getting more than Martin Brodeur. That's never going to happen, right? So he served as a cap on the goalie market for many years, and the goalie market has still not recovered from that. There's an argument to make in baseball starting pitcher, in NFL it's quarterback, in hockey the goalie. You know, shouldn't goalies be on many teams the highest paid player on the team?
Well, Jeff Merrick always used to say that hockey should just be renamed goalie because that's how important they are. You have bad goaltending, you're sunk. It's over. Over. And one consideration, I've never had a conversation with Jeremy Swayman. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what's going through his mind at all. I wish him all the best. But
I'm sitting back and I'm wondering, I would say wondering. I'm looking at the impact in a positive way his position will have on the future goalie market in the NHL. Because there's another goalie coming up very soon.
Yes.
On a renegotiation. And that's the guy in New York with the Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to clearly set a new standard on his deal. And, what's that saying about rising ships?
Floats all boats. Yeah.
And that's clearly happening right now in the goalie market in the NHL. But again, because there's a cap, if goalies are getting more, if a player is getting more on a particular team, it just means there's less for everybody else. So is Bob Goodenow right when he calls us all allocators? He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Oh, you think so? Okay. All right. Allan, I want to ask you very quickly too. I do want to touch on this point. When it gets into the public and it gets a little messy, and then you see a team and a player and representation come together, contract gets done. How do you put the messiness aside? Because the Swayman thing undoubtedly has spilled out into the press. The way that the Nylander thing did, the way that the Marner thing did, it happens all the time. How do you take, this is essentially like Jeremy Swayman is going to sign a deal if he signs with Boston, and Cam Neely's going to be his boss, right? He's reporting ultimately to Cam Neely, and Cam Neely has just set this. And how do you get past it?
You have to be mature about it. And there's a general manager that I've had a great relationship with for many, many years. We had a major disagreement over a player. It got pretty ugly. It got into the media, and it got settled. And it was a matter of months to settle it. And the first time I saw this general manager after settling that situation, and it was pretty ugly. He came out of the dressing room. I was standing by the dressing room doors waiting for my client to come out after a game. It's actually after a playoff game. And our eyes locked. He walked over to me and we gave each other a big hug. Right?
Okay.
So not everybody is the hugging kind. But if you're going to survive in this business, you need to understand that business is business, and once the business gets done, we're all going to work together again. Doesn't have to be your favorite person in the world. Maybe he will be. Who knows? But I think and I've been involved in some pretty ugly situations where it has gotten personal, and there have been multiple levels of disrespect heaped upon me and the player during the negotiation, during the situation. And people say to me, do you hold a grudge? Do you think about it? Does it bother you? The number one thing is this: if you care about what people think about you, go do something else. Right? The only obligation, I work for the player. I work for the players. The player is my boss. That's who I report to. That's where my 100% loyalty lies, with the player. Go ahead and write anything you want about me. go ahead, say anything you want about me. Go ahead, go on Twitter and call me a name. Call my voicemail in my office and leave me a 1-minute message swearing up and down at me. I got a collection of those over 30 years. And if you care about that, if it hurts your feelings, if it makes you feel bad at all in any way, go do something else.
Okay. I love it. Allan, great insights. I love the Havlat story. I feel like some of the stories that you have, some that you have shared off the air that we haven't talked about on the air because, there's still interested parties. We could make a mini series out of just client stories for Netflix. Honestly, like there's some pretty high stakes things going on. Loved the Havlat story, and I loved your insight on this. Thank you.
You got it. Great being with you. Have a great week. Have a great rest of the week, and see you next week.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.